I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Sarah Biber, and I am the Executive Director at the National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center. I'm joined by some wonderful colleagues today who I'll introduce you to in a moment, and we are thrilled to have so many of you joining us today to learn more about the inaugural Gates Ventures NACC digital pilot program. So we look forward to sharing more about our motivations, our aspirations for this program with you, and hope to answer as many of your questions as possible. You can learn, next slide, please. Next slide. You can learn more about this program via our website at bit.ly/DGP_awards. And if we don't get to any of your questions today, I just want to preemptively let you know that you can reach out to nacmail@uw.edu to have your questions addressed. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I'm joined by some wonderful colleagues today. That includes Narajan Bose, Nina Silverberg, and Rhoda Au. Narajan is the Managing Director of Health and Life Sciences at Gates Ventures. My colleague Nina Silverberg is Alzheimer's Disease Research Center Program Director at the National Institute of Aging. And Rhoda O is a Professor of Anatomy and Neurobiology at Boston University, Director of the Neuropsychology for the Framingham Heart Study, and a consultant to global cohort development for the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. And I already told you who I am. Next slide. All right, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, all. Greetings from rainy Seattle. It's great to be here for this kickoff of the fantastic partnership that's been in the works. As Sarah mentioned, I'm with Gates Ventures, which is Mr. Gates's private office. We're based in the Seattle area, and I lead our work in the Health and Life Sciences program for Gates Ventures. The next slide just gives you a flavor for the type of engagements that we've actually been part of in the last 5 years. We formally announced Bill's interest in the Alzheimer's and related dementia area, where he wanted to use his philanthropic investments, voice, and time to advance 5 aspects of what we call 5 pillars, which will show up in the next slide. The 5 programmatic areas.
Sorry, I think we're going to need Sarah to take over slide sharing.
I'm happy to keep going when the slides can catch up. So the 5 areas, and none of these will come as surprises to you. Bill has written extensively in his blog post, the Gates Notes, as well. Our program officially started in 2017, the end of 2017, and the 5 programmatic pillars, starting from upstream biology, the need to better understand the etiology, the disease mechanisms and pathways, all the way through data, enabling data sharing. So the first pillar is the upstream research pillar, where we fully recognize the National Institutes of Aging and their significant budget allocation drives a lot of that. So we look for ways to support or complement that in any way philanthropy can. The second pillar for us is an easy-to-use, non-invasive, scalable early detection or diagnostic tool. That was our partnership with the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, where we launched the Diagnostics Accelerator in 2018. The third pillar is we'd like to take some more shots on goal, or more diverse shots on goal vis-a-vis the therapeutic pipeline. We've had a partnership with the Alzheimer's Association on Part the Cloud, and Bill, and the 2 non-philanthropic investments for us are in the Dementia Discovery Fund and the EQT Life Sciences Dementia Fund, where again they're mission-driven venture philanthropy venture funds, and our primary objective there is to try and open the aperture on the clinical pipeline. The fourth pillar for us is clinical trial bottlenecks, ways we can make trial enrollment more efficient, perhaps even have better ways to track individuals who screen but fail to enroll in studies. And also, are there ways we can make the duration for many of these trials as short as possible? with a view that all of this could lead to more faster trials and also perhaps less expensive trials. The final pillar for us is on data, enabling data sharing, enabling or creating incentives for broader access to data sets, both retrospective data as well as the data that's going to show up in the years and decades to come. And slide 6, I think, shows you an overview of everything that I've just spoken about, some of the logo soup of the partnerships that we've been very thankful to have been part of, and organizations that we've actually partnered with to drive some of our programmatic pillars. And you'll see each of these maps to the 5 pillars that I just mentioned. And this logo compilation is by no means comprehensive, just wanted to illustrate some of our partnerships to date. And on the next slide, I picked out a few that we have been able to catalyze in 2023, and you'll see a lot of them squarely sit in the biomarkers and diagnostic space, including digital, and that's why we're delighted to be here in partnership with NACC, NIA, and all of you colleagues, the ADRCs, to explore what more we can do in the digital biomarker or digital marker space. And thanks again for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Bose, it's been a pleasure working with you on this. We're happy to have Gates Ventures and NACC partner in this program, and we're really excited to launch it. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to be talking about why the ADRC program is a great place to run this pilot. So as many of you are probably aware, we have 33 Alzheimer's centers across the country, plus 4 P20 exploratory centers. And there is a very wide array of expertise and participants and topic areas within the wider field of Alzheimer's and related dementias at the Alzheimer's centers, both as a network and individual centers. So there is a heavy emphasis on data and sample sharing, as well as making opportunities available to participants to participate in other very large studies and clinical trials. So this slide is meant to depict the wide sharing of data samples and participant access that is available through the ADRC program in partnership with NACC, NCRAD, SCAN, GAIN, ADGC for genetics, and also NIAGADS. Next slide. So this is mostly from a presentation I gave at the ADRC meeting, but really helps to emphasize the very important role that the Alzheimer's centers have in AD and ADRD research. And at least my vision, I hope it is reality, is that the Alzheimer's centers will help to continue to help to lead the field scientifically and develop new approaches. And this is exactly why I think they're a great place for this pilot. I think they all support justice and equity, and we're working to do more in that realm. They provide standardized data samples and participants across both multiple types of dementia and different levels of severity to support recruitment for clinical trials and other national research efforts. They have strong community ties that are enabled by the sustained support over multiple years at many of the centers, which helps with better retention for longitudinal data. They are all involved in training the next generation. And importantly, because they're a center, it's a multidisciplinary environment. The fact that we are attempting to obtain autopsy on all of these participants with all of this data is extremely valuable for every area of research and really important, and a major pillar of what the centers are doing. They're also, as I showed in the previous slide, part of a larger infrastructure. And again, they work both as part of a network and locally, both local public and local research communities. Next slide. So this is a slide I borrowed from a newly funded project called Clarity, put together by Beth Mormino and Sterling Johnson, and just helps to illustrate really the benefit. Clarity is within the ADRC program, and you can see all those green Ys show all the different types of dementia that are represented in the ADRCs, and how other major large studies, although they're extremely valuable and important, are really focused on single disease types. Next slide. So, and you can click through, I guess there's some animation on this one as well. Limitations of traditional cognitive assessments, that although they're very valuable and validated in the past, they are removed from people's reality. And when you're sitting in an office being tested, the environments and the social cues and everything are very dissimilar from their actual life. And so there are effects that are known of that type of assessment, and they're also typically just one time. And so you can really miss a lot of the variability when we're doing cognitive assessments in that way. So the right side figure is just meant to illustrate that a person's actual function can be fluctuating considerably, but if they're only tested once every 6 months or once a year, we really may miss a lot of changes that are actually happening. And it can appear that they're getting worse, getting better, staying the same, when that's completely not true. So we do need to have better, more frequent assessment methods. Next slide. Next. So, and Brittany, if you don't mind, or whoever's sharing, please click through to show the rest of this slide. But in-home technology really is a change for the future, and I give Jeff Kay credit for this as his slide. As I was mentioning, the assessments that we typically do are brief, episodic, clinic-based, subjective, obtrusive, and inconvenient for having people have to come into an office or laboratory. And having in-home assessments are the opposite, basically: real-time, continuous, home-based, objective, unobtrusive, and ambient. And they actually measure the real thing that's happening in the person's world. And I think if you click again, there's another piece here. Yes. So this really and again, please. This really offers the opportunity to be able to measure things that we just haven't measured at all previously. And so this is why I'm excited, and have been for a long time, to try to incorporate this with all the rest of the Alzheimer's centers data and resources. Next. So CART was an example with a lot of in-home technology. Again, this is Jeff Kay and his group at Oregon Health and Science Center. The CART initiative, which I helped to initiate, was a multi-NIH institute project that was carried out with multiple different minoritized populations, and really shows that we can do this and we can get really interesting and useful data. So I'm excited to see what projects come in for this pilot, and I think the next slide is the next speaker.
Great. So that's my turn. So I am gonna, I think one of the things that we thought might be useful as ADRCs are thinking about what technology they want to work with for these pilot programs is really talking about what it means to partner up with a technology company, which is often a private industry company. So if we could just go very quickly to the next slide. No, this is actually obviously just a reminder. We're not about technology for technology's sake. We're actually about science. And so if we go to the next slide, and this is really the infrastructure with the ADRCs that we have to work with, right? So if we go to the next slide. So really what we're trying to do, and if you can click forward a couple, we're trying to get from where we are with this infrastructure to filling all the gaps within the US, right? That's one of the goals that we hope technology is going to help solve. And then if you hit it again, and that's sort of leading the pathway, and if you can hit it one more time, to this global vision. And the reason I say that, actually, I'm sorry, if you could just, the reason I say that is because, as we know, many other research groups around the world actually follow the lead of the ADRCs. So that's why whatever we're doing, even though we're domestically focused, we're actually globally relevant. So if we can go to the next slide. So, but right now, as Nina was just pointing out, we can't really get there to this vision based doing on what we're already doing. So if we can go to the next slide. So one of the ways to really try to achieve this is really to think about who we can partner with in order to reach this goal. So if we go to the next slide. So what I wanted to do first is just talk about, some of the dimensions that really are about how do you establish these successful collaborations. So the next slide. And so if we can just maybe, click through, these are just actually some of the ways in which I personally have been thinking about how when I pair up, when I talk to a technology company, what are the things that are really important to me? And I think it's really important to clearly define what are the strategic objectives going into this. So we've talked about the importance of digital biomarkers, shifting to passive engagement technology for continuous, obviously the issue of representation. We also want to make sure we're broadly sharing this diversity, this data, and then also in thinking about who's actually working with this data. So these are sort of objectives that I kind of make upfront clear as I move forward with any technology vendor discussion. So next. And then, so the other thing that we need to make sure is that we also really clearly define then, what are some of the criteria that we need to use to make decisions in determining what technology partners are good to work with. So data security, nothing happens without data security, privacy, confidentiality. There's lots of costs and benefits that you have to sort of weigh in. It turns out the higher your data quality is, the likely that it's going to be more costly, and then vice versa. As the data quality maybe decreases, then your cost also decrease. We have to think about who we're reaching with whatever technology that we choose in order to think about how we're going to be maximally inclusive. And then I think it's really important to think about how digital data, the way in which you collect it, is done so that it is future-proof. So if we go to the next slide. But I think that the key whenever you're trying to establish any partnership, it's not just with industry, it's actually with any partnership, is that you have to think about the value proposition for everybody that's involved. That includes the participants. Like, we have to be able to deliver value back to them as they're using these technologies. Obviously, it needs to bring benefit on the scientific side, but for the technology partner, it has to make business sense to them. It has to meet their needs as well in order for a partnership to really go forward. So now I'm going to focus, if we can go to the next slide, what are some of the barriers to these academic industry collaborations? So if we start, go to the next slide. So if we hit again, so really this idea that there is still pervasive, this idea that, private industry is bad. Science, academics, good, private industry is bad. I do this from a Boston Red Sox biased lens, by the way. So, but anyways, and I think that has been shifting over the last few years because some of the needs that we have from a technology standpoint are really only possible or really at a scalable cost perspective if you pair up with industry. So if we go to the next slide. Then, there's always the issue of then as you do this work together, who owns what? IP is a very big issue, and you need to think, I tell people, you need to think individually, how much is it important to you to hang on to IP? Because for the business partners, IP is also very important to them. And so you are going to need to figure it out. The more that you want to hang on to your IP, the more difficult it's going to become to establish these relationships. So if we go to the next slide, for private industry, one of the things that they're very concerned about is protecting anything that's proprietary. You know, what gives them sort of that market business advantage that gives them the market itself. And so, and there's a lot of concerns, particularly in working with academics, where there might be reverse engineering, which would then undermine sort of whatever it is their secret sauce is that's allowing them to move forward in a competitive market. If we go to the next slide, you know, one of the problems working with technology, of course, is that it is constantly being updated. I think most of us probably have a smartphone, so you know how often things are getting updated, not to mention all the versions of you know, your software applications that need updating on top of that. So, you know, one of the things that's difficult when you're doing this kind of work is this idea that you have to lock in. You can't really lock in when it's a technology because you need to continually worrying about upgrading, but upgrading has a cost to it as well, including, you know, bringing in sort of disruptions into your workflow that you've worked, you know, that you have in place with maybe your participants. Then in the next slide. And then the other problem, of course, is that, which is tied to the issue of versioning, is the fact that if you try to stick too closely to the original technology that you originally proposed, it's going to be obsolete. There's the average technology cycle is somewhere between 6 months to a year. And if you think about you know, the way we always think about longitudinal data, which is that we don't change the instruments that we use to collect the data. If you don't do that in the technology space, you're gonna be left behind very, very quickly. So if we go to the next slide, and not to mention technology companies don't like to support their old versions of their technology, not for very long. Okay, sorry, next slide. The other problem that you have with technology companies is, of course, they're always looking for their markets. And in thinking about where their markets, particularly if you're starting with startup companies, which are still, you know, they're in the very beginning stages, they start out with sort of a focus that aligns with your scientific objectives, and then they start to find out that that their market opportunities are actually in other directions. I actually was just reminded of this. I had started out with this one company right at its beginning stages, and they recently gave me an update on how they were doing. And they're doing very well, apparently, in the cannabis research area, which is definitely not where I'm at these days. So anyway, so and, you know, we started out thinking that there was something there, and it clearly, you know, they started going directions that were different. And that is likely, that there's no question that that could happen when you work with a technology company. Next. And then, you know, the other problem is that there's lots of changes in leadership. I'm reminded of this as I work with pharma all the time, just because they change over, it seems like every 3 to 4 years. But that's true with companies as well, particularly, again, startup companies, as they try to grow and bring in new people. And then the other big problem is that what is the company's exit plan? What, you know, for any startup company, they have to have some sort of potential exit strategy. I mean, some want to go to, you know, to become publicly traded, but most actually are focused on getting acquired. And what you have to really worry about is who's going to acquire them and what are their priorities, which may no longer align with the research ones that you originally set up. And then if we go to the next one. Oops. I think we have one more. There we go. And that's the other problem. We hear about companies that go out of business all the time. Certainly in the startup world, more companies will fail than will succeed. But even within mature companies, as we know, they can run out of steam as well, particularly if they're not following market forces. So, so if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to end that despite all these potential challenges, hopefully knowing that they exist will put you in a position to create a much more mutually beneficial partnership But you do need to have some awareness walking in as to what that partnership will look like. And that's it on my end.
Thanks so much, Rhoda, for the excellent overview of industry academic partnership opportunities and potential challenges. I think it's really important that folks go into this program with eyes wide open and are aware of some of the things to look out for. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to provide an overview of NACC, because I know some folks, since this program is open to basically anybody. Some of you may not be familiar with NACC or the ADRC program. We've heard some about that, but I'll share a bit more about our role with regards to the ADRC program. And I'm also going to be providing some additional details about this program in particular with Gates. So next slide, please. So NACC, the National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center, serves as the data, collaboration, and communication hub, as well as the centralized data repository for NIA's Alzheimer's Disease Research Center program. So there are currently 33 ADRCs and 4 exploratory centers that are spread across 26 states. That's, you'll see all their logos here. And next slide. And so I wanted to share a little bit about how this works. So there are 37 independent centers, like I said, around the country, and they collect standardized longitudinal data. So standards for this data are set in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center Clinical Task Force, which is made up of leading experts from across the country. And in many cases, these standards are set prior to data collection. So everyone's collecting data in the same way across these 37 centers. And these centers are enrolling research participants who are healthy, at risk, and with dementia symptoms. We have all of those groups well represented within our database. And centers collect standardized longitudinal data through annual visits using tools that are, as I mentioned, co-developed by that CTF and NACC. So we have quite a range of longitudinal data. And you can see that range here, including up to 18 years of data on some participants. And over these past 2 decades, NACC has really been focused on collecting, harmonizing, integrating, and sharing that ADRC data. And so we have a lot of data. So you can see kind of our numbers there in terms of, you know, how many, about more than 48,000 participants. Many clinical assessments have been done. We have a lot of neuropathology, standardized neuropathology data sets as well. Many published studies using our data, and that number is going up considerably as we've modernized our systems, which I'll share more about. Next slide. So I wanted to share a little bit about what's unique and special about NACC data, because any digital data that's collected through this program is going to be, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, combined and integrated with that data that we have already. So what NACC has, apologies, did not expect my voice to go like this. What NACC has is, as I mentioned, one of the largest and most comprehensive longitudinal standardized clinical and neuropathological data sets in the world. I mentioned the types of participants that are there. One of the nice things about this longitudinal data is that we often capture data for participants prior to and also post-dementia onsets. We can often catch that transition as it happens. And we have the infrastructure in place for ongoing participant tracking, as well as robust criteria-based diagnoses. So the diagnoses with NACC offer are referred to as gold standard at many centers. This involves consensus diagnoses that are reached by multiple specialists, and they're very, very robust diagnoses. We collect a wide range of rich multi-domain neurocognitive data. And as Nina mentioned, we have a wide range of neuropathology data for diverse etiologies. So about 60% of ADRC participants are enrolled brain donors. And we have pure etiology represented with our database, as well as mixed pathologies well represented in our database for conditions including, Lewy body disease, frontotemporal dementia, cerebrovascular disease, and TDP-43 based dementias. Next slide, please. So I want to share a little bit about our exciting new NACC data platform, because this is very integral to what the work that is going to be taking place as part of this pilot. So we have a modern cloud-based multimodal data integration and harmonization platform. So we've been undergoing some pretty dramatic modernization over the past 2 years to establish this. So we recently moved all of our existing data onto new virtualized cloud-based multimodal platform. This is powered by a company called Flywheel. And we have developed a new electronic data capture system that's powered by REDCap. We're also expanding interoperability with the related NIA-funded repositories to integrate additional metadata and analysis data for ADRC participants. So you'll see a couple of folks up there. So that includes collaborating with the National Institute on Aging, Genetics of Alzheimer's Disease Data Storage, so NIGADS, to bring in additional genetic and genomic metadata analysis data, as well as partnering with the National Centralized Repository for Alzheimer's Disease and Related Dementias, known as NICRAD, to bring in additional blood biomarker and biospecimen data for ADRC participants, as well as a newish initiative called SCAN, which is a standardized centralized Alzheimer's related dementias neuroimaging study that is focused on bringing in standardized MRI and PET data from across the ADRC program. Next slide, please. We're also developing standards and building pipelines to collect, integrate, harmonize, and share new pilot data modalities such as digital neuropathology data, EHR and CMS data, as well as, of course, through this program and other initiatives, digital data or digital biomarkers. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, Nina mentioned the Clarity Initiative, which stands for Clarity in ADRD Research Through Imaging, which we're very excited about, led by Beth Mormino and Sterling Johnson, as she mentioned. And what this is going to do is actually enable us to amplify some of our existing pipelines, including bringing in more standardized MRI and PET data, as well as additional blood biomarker data from across the ADRC program. And it's also going to bring in some new data streams, such as advanced MRI data, as well as digital neuropath data. So we're very excited about that. And that's really all this data is going to be collected, integrated, and shared via the NACC data platform. It's all integrated using our unique identifier for ADRC participants, known as the NACC ID. This is all going to be shared out through what we call the NACC data front door. And that has several components to it, which I'll mention in my next slide. But really the goal here with this platform is that it's scalable to new data streams, including the digital data streams we hope to collect via this new program. We are setting it up to be capable of real-time data search, visualization, and access. And one of our goals is that we make this data as ready as possible for things like AI-driven discovery. Next slide. So I want to share a little bit about the data front door. Some of these components are up and running, and some of them are ones that we're in the process of building right now. So essentially, what the data front door is intended to be is really the one-stop shop for all ADRC data. So all those different data streams that I shared with you, collected from across the ADRC program for the same participants. So you can imagine it's really powerful, right, to be able to have all these data streams integrated for the same participants. And we're really excited about how the addition of digital data will allow researchers to ask and answer new questions in AD and ADRD, and hopefully lead to new ADRD insights and discoveries through this program and other mechanisms. So just a quick piece of this. So we have, as we bring in these additional data streams to this program, we'll be looking to share those through some of these data front door components here. So it includes things like a quick access file. We also have dashboards to show in real time, like what data is available for different types of modalities. And then we're in the process right now of building a really exciting tool focused on cohort selection, where researchers can come and really build their own multimodal data sets and download those for analysis. Next slide, please. So if anybody wants to get more familiar with NACC data and is not, you can actually submit a 15-minute data request and get all of our data within 24 to 48 hours. Take a look at all the data we have available right now. As I mentioned, the new kinds of data are coming online regularly. So, but you can have a snapshot of what's available right now if you'd like by going to naccdata.com. Next slide. So why digital data? So we've already heard some very compelling things about digital data. I want to share a little bit to that. Next slide, please. So as I'm sure folks here are aware, there's an enormous unmet need in ADRD research for high resolution, high value, and objective measures that can be captured ideally frequently over time, not just once a year at an annual visit. So we believe, and others believe, that these digital measures and tools really hold promise for supporting things like earlier diagnosis, defining detection, defining disease phenotypes, predicting prognosis, monitoring disease and treatments longitudinally, especially now that we have some really promising new therapeutics that have come online. We want to be able to regularly monitor the impact of those treatments on the disease progression, and hopefully a disease amelioration. So we also want to reduce participant burden through things like passive data collection, and we want to be able to optimize clinical trials. So there's a really neat study that was published by Hiroko Dodge's team recently that showed that they actually built an algorithm using NACC data that could be used to enrich for clinical trial participants that were more likely to undergo rapid decline. Next slide, please. So what we're talking about when we talk about digital data and phenotyping is really clinically meaningful data that's collected through digital technologies. That can be active or passive. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And this can take on a lot of different forms in the context of the ADRC program. So this can include clinically administered. So that can involve digitizing existing paper-based to other administered assessments such as phenotyping or diagnostic tools, or adding voice data capture, for example, to traditional tests. It can include remotely administered. So this could involve more frequent, cognitive tests that can be administered from home and allow for more granular longitudinal data collection. It can also involve the introduction of innovative features like gamification to increase participant engagement. As far as out of clinic collection, there is a wide range that falls into that bucket. But this could include tests that are administered or digital health tools, that can be collected through consumer digital health tools and new data digital markers to evaluate a wide range of phenotypes. So that can include physiological measures or activities, including heart rate, mobility, gait, steps, sleep, cognitive testing, and home monitoring. So those out of clinic administered tests or digital health tools are far less standardized, but are important for research. Next slide, please. So essentially, there's a wide range of it's really the Wild West right now when it comes to digital data collection, and it covers a lot of concepts. It's very, very heterogeneous, and many are collecting data, and there are few, if any, standards and standardizations. So one of the things that's really important to us at NACC, next slide, and to do through this program is really to be able to help standardize, harmonize, and ensure the efficacy and collect established instruments, and also be able to facilitate discovery using new technologies that have research and clinical value and are very likely to be unharmonized. Next slide. Okay, and so just want to mention as well, so all of these, whatever digital data and biomarkers are collected through this program are going to be shared out through the NACC infrastructure that I walked you through. Next slide. We, of course, hope that this data will be amenable to things like AI-based discovery, including for things like decision support. Next slide. And ultimately, we want to use this program as a launching point for being able to develop standardized and clinically validated digital biomarkers for AD, ADRD that will support all of the things that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. So let's go into a little more details of the program, and I want to leave time for questions. We've already talked about the goals. I think everyone's seen, we're going to be funding up to 3 pilots for $250K to $1 million in direct costs. There's a 15% indirect cap. That's really important. That is part of this program. And we're open to projects that are 1 to 2 years in length. Next slide. Next part. Open to anyone as long as you have 2 ADRC collaborators, up to 2. At least 2 is what I meant to say. Next slide. And funding will be provided through NACC, and will support partners providing the digital instruments, ADRCs that will be doing the data collection with digital technologies. There is additional funding that we provided for NACC to be able to do that integration that is outside of that $250 to $1 million in direct costs. So you don't need to incorporate that into your budget. And we have a really fantastic review committee that we've pulled together that includes experts in scalable digital technologies from across academia, industry, and government. Next slide. Okay, so a couple requirements. So we are looking for, really interested in pilots that add research value, enhance metrics, reduce burden, expand and address diversity, involve, as I said, multiple ADRCs. And we're interested in technologies that are going to be scalable, and not necessarily just to the full ADRC program down the line, but also hopefully beyond the ADRC program as well. We are amenable to, we're also really interested in technologies that could lead to data collection that could be used for open data science challenges down the line. And it's essential that all companies that participate in this are willing to provide the raw digital files to NACC so that we can share those with researchers everywhere. Lots of different example modalities that we're open to. You can see the list there. Lots of different tools. So very, very flexible on that. The deadline is on February 21st, so please keep that in mind. Next slide, please. And I also just want to mention that this program is really intended to be a launch point, not an end point, right? So these projects are pilot projects. We really, for projects that are successful, we're wanting to work really closely to try to scale these further, provide additional support. That could be through a data challenge that we run in collaboration with Gates Ventures, using the data collected through this pilot. It could involve any kind of promising digital tools. We would consider building into the NACC's U24 grant renewal and working to try to scale those to additional ADRCs. And then we're also going to be working with NIA's SPR SATR office to try to help support any promising digital technologies that emerge from this pilot program. Next slide. So very briefly, we're using pretty standard NIH criteria here for how these are going to be evaluated. That includes, we want folks to address the significance, innovation, and the impact. And I want to be really clear here that things can be very impactful in this context without being innovative. We really do think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in this arena, and we're very open to proposals as well that are not necessarily very innovative, but are going to be very impactful. They have to be feasible, so we want to really be convinced that the project has a realistic plan and timeline for execution. And as I mentioned, we'd also like them to be scalable, so technologies that can be ideally scaled to a broader set of the ADRCs as well as beyond the ADRC program. And it's very important to us that these technologies focus on accessibility and equity. So we really want to increase access to these digital tools and be able to reach more diverse participants. So next slide. With that, we're going to go into questions and answers. And I will also mention that there is an FAQ on the NACC website as well. So you can also go there to see if any of your questions are listed there as well. And we'll be adding to that based on the questions we get today. So without further ado, let's jump into questions. So Brittany, do you want folks to put the questions into the chat? Is that right?
Yeah, actually, Hannah, would you mind going forward a couple slides? We have a little info thing sharing how to share your questions. So you can raise your hand, have a moderator call on you, or I can start reading off some of the questions that we've received in the chat. I'll kick off with one of the questions. So we have one question saying, can I get a partnership with other ADRCs which have biomarker cores like PET and blood biomarkers, because our ADRC has few biomarker data and lots of genetic data. I wonder if other ADRCs are willing to collaborate for our grant.
So I'll just sort of mention that we actually did a little survey of all the ADRCs to identify those who are interested in being part of an application. So we can share that. We haven't screened them specifically for the biomarker data that you've talked about, but we certainly have identified ADRCs that are interested in being involved in applications. So, so maybe just reaching out, we can help identify that for you.
Yeah, NACC has committed to connecting the interested companies or others with ADRCs, and so there will be a mechanism for that. But I will say that all of the ADRCs are collecting biomarkers of multiple sorts, and the funding of Clarity, which Sarah and I both mentioned, will support even further collection of more and different types of biomarkers. So I think it should be easier than in the past, at least, to partner with different ADRCs that have those capabilities.
So I see a lot of questions in the chat,
And multiple hands up.
and multiple hands up. Brittany, do you want to call in folks? Or?
Well, Kimberly had her hand up first.
Great. Kimberly, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kimberly, and I'm a patient advocate with Herpes Cure Advocacy. And herpes is spreading globally without public health intervention. It's also strongly suspected as a contributing factor to Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. And I was just curious what is being done to address the epidemic of herpes and how this program could potentially benefit patients. Thank you.
So this program is designed to be very broad. And so although I don't think we have any ADRCs with a focus on viral spreading, there are NIA funded programs and other NIH funded programs looking into that. So unless there's a digital aspect to what you're asking about, I'm not sure this particular program would be the best fit for that. I don't know if others want to say anything.
That sounds right to me. Okay.
Keith?
Keith.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Keith from the aging research charity Lifespan.io. I posted some questions in the chat, but in addition to those questions, I have another one. I believe you had mentioned, and it's in the documentation, that any sort of submitting project needs to be an existing collaborator with some of the centers, right? So I'm aware of a good number of digital biomarker technologies that would probably be great for submitting here, but don't yet have those relationships. Does that relationship have to go back for a number of years, or could they reach out to those collaborating organizations now and try to include them in some way and then submit?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. You do not need to have a pre-existing relationship with an ADRC. Actually, in fact, one of the things we're hoping will emerge from this are new relationships between industry and ADRCs. And so if you are, you're welcome to reach out to ADRCs. You're also, if you're specifically interested in ADRCs that have expressed interest in this program, we have a list of those. And Brittany on my team is happy to connect you with potential ADRCs. So if you go to our website, you can reach out. There's information on how to reach out if you're looking for ADRCs specifically to partner with.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
A follow-up question to that came into the chat as well, saying this is all great information, thank you. Should ADRC researchers also email NACC to get connected with tech companies?
So we do not have a comprehensive list of tech companies that are interested in this program. So there may be some. We can work with our tech work group, maybe Rhoda, to connect some folks. We may be able to do that. If you're interested, I would say reach out to us with your idea. And if we can help, we will. We'll bring it to our tech work group and we'll see if anyone can leverage their connections to maybe think of a company you could connect with. Absolutely.
I just wanted to piggyback on that point, Sarah. It's related to one of my comments. Yeah, if there's, I don't know if this deck or if there's another deck that can be made available that we can share. Some of the major tech companies have programs by which they can in a sense, donate the usage of their relevant technology to initiatives like this, some that are very relevant to what we're talking about here, including, big companies like Disney. So if I had something in hand, I could talk to the CSOs of those organizations and have them reach out to see if that can happen. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure we get some of the other questions from the chat. Hannah and Brittany, can you guys?
Yes. We have one from Mike Brown. Could you define raw digital files? Is that the raw sensor data, or may that be up to the company's discretion?
Yeah, hey, this is Mike. I can add some more color to that. So with digital biomarkers, some of the IP is that feature engineering to translate what they're capturing from the sensors to neurocognitive domains. And so some of the concern would be if we would just provide all the raw data out into a database, does that then allow somebody to easily recreate the scores without us? So what are you assuming is raw data? Is that our cognitive domains that we've captured but then presented out, or is that sensor data as well?
So I would just tell you that the high preference is actually sensor-based data. And the main reason is because we have to worry about future-proofing this. If you just give us derived measures, it's going to be on the basis of the algorithm that you have created today, which will obviously be outdated, tomorrow. So we have to worry. The other thing is that as things evolve longitudinally, we have to be able to harmonize the existing data with future data. So those are the two problems that we have to worry about from a scientific standpoint. So generally what I do is, at least mine, and I think each group will have to decide, and I think NACC will have to weigh in on this, is that there might be some that are, so you have to probably separate a little bit in terms of what you can provide in terms of raw sensor data that doesn't expose your IP versus where your sort of line in the sand is in terms of I cannot share this because that will put my proprietary intellectual property in at risk. So that I don't but you should understand the rationale for the raw data needs.
Great, thanks.
Okay, we have another question from Judy at UCSD. Her question is there a requirement 2 different ADRCs, or can it be 2 different investigators at a single ADRC?
It needs to be 2 different ADRCs. Yeah.
We have another question. The application asks for IRB approval that seems to be needed at the time of application. Can you confirm or expand on this?
Yeah, so it is the responsibility of the applicant to ensure that they get IRB approval to do the study, right? So that is something that will need to be established at each ADRC. It may require, you're gonna have to work with those ADRCs to get that going. We're happy to help provide some guidance at NACC to help support that in terms of what's worked for other kinds of studies, but that is ultimately the responsibility of the applicant.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that you don't have to have IRB approval at the time that you submit the application. It's after you get funded, then you have to work, pretty quickly, and you probably want to work that into some of your timelines as you're thinking about, what's the length of period, somewhere between 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, NACC has preemptively updated our IRB to ensure that we can collect and share this type of data. So that side of things is ready to go.
Okay. We have another question asking if companies can partner with international investigators, and is there a process to pitch new technologies or proposals to ADRCs?
So in what sense of partnering with international investigators? Is that as far as like ADRCs partnering with them to pilot a technology for this, or can someone clarify? There was a question that was.
I believe that question was from Joe K.
I can answer the second part of the question, is that NACC does not currently have a mechanism for supporting companies pitching to ADRCs. although that is something we could consider doing in the future.
He clarified in the chat, he says tech companies partnering with international investors.
So this is open to anybody as long as you're partnering with 2 ADRCs. So if you are a tech company who has an international investor who wants to partner with 2 ADRCs as part of this pilot project, then you would be welcome to do that. I hope that answers your question.
And then we have one more question asking, what would an ADRC partnership look like for a company with a focused proposal already?
With a focused proposal already? I'm going to need
Yes.
a little more clarification on that. Is that? It really depends on the proposal, so it's hard to answer that for me. I'm having a hard time answering that. If whoever posted that question wants to add some additional info, happy to take a stab at it.
Would the ADRC be involved in the scientific design, aims, etc.?
Gotcha. I think that really depends on which ADRC you're partnering with. I would imagine some of them would be eager to be involved in that piece of it, especially to make sure it's tailored in a way that's going to work for deployment at their ADRC. But some of them may be very happy to go with the proposal that you have. I think it really depends on how feasible it's going to be at that particular ADRC. I don't know if Nina and Rhoda, if you have more to add to that.
No, I think that's about right.
I see that we have, I think we could probably take 1 or 2 additional questions before we're gonna have to close, but we will be going through all of these questions and we will be adding these to our FAQ. So if we've missed you, I'm sorry about that, but we will get to it. And you can also send your questions. Brittany, if you could put in the chat again, the email that they should use. It's nacmail@uw.org. .edu, sorry. There it is, nacmail@uw.edu.
And the slides and webinar will be shared on the NAC website after.
Correct.
Some
Yes.
point.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
several people are asking about that.
Yes, we will absolutely be sharing this on our website. Okay. I am sorry that we ran out of time. I hope this was helpful to folks. We're so excited to review your proposals with our committee and are happy to try and address as many questions as we can leading up to the deadline. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I want to thank my fellow panelists for joining today and thank them for sharing their expertise. And I really want to give a special shout out to Gates Ventures for partnering with us on this new program. And we're very excited about the impact we think it's going to have. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.